I hate getting sucker punched into believing something that isn't true. And in this episode, I'm going to tell you how the media and how you get sucker punched into believing false things without you even knowing it. It all comes down to how your brain is wired. Your brain doesn't have a truth or false part of it that decides what is truth or false, but it has a memory, and you have different memories. One memory is called your working memory, your general IQ, and that is basically how many numbers can you hold in your head at any given time. Normally that's about 9 numbers. You also have implicit memory, which is how I walk, for example, and how I play tennis, how I use my fork and knife to eat. It's not something I think about, it's something I just do. And then you have your explicit memories. That's what I'm doing now. I'm pulling memories out of my explicit memory bank and tell you exactly how it works. And that's how you deliberately explain something to someone else. And of course, you also have episodic memory. Episodic memory is when you make a memory based on an episode, and usually that's connected to an emotion. For example, women have more connections to their left amygdala in their brain, and therefore they remember things more in detail than any man does. Now, when it comes to men, that is not the same, because men have more connections to their right amygdala, which gives men the ability of sort of overview or remembering the gist of things. But how does this have anything to do with how you get fooled or sucker punched from the media into believing things that aren't true? Well, it basically comes down to exposure to what people are saying. So here's the trick. When people listen to other people or read things, they either use their left hemisphere, where you have focus and attention, or they listen with their heart. Basically what that means, they're listening with their right hemisphere and sort of understanding the unconscious feeling that comes with the message. The problem is that you learn by exposing yourself to things. And the things that you ingrain in your memory are basically what you find relevant. That's what differs humans from AI, for example. AI doesn't think about what's relevant. It just does an algorithm, and that's not how humans work. So how do people get fooled? Well, it comes down to you being exposed to information. You read things, you see things. Since you have an IQ that is limited, you will then have to only ingrain in your memory what you find relevant. So they've done tests on truth and false statements. And one such thing is effect, I should say, is the priming effect. You can prime someone with information that you can then access and make them do things that they didn't think they would do. There's a famous movie from Will Smith that sort of showcases how that works. And then you have the exposure effect. The exposure effect basically is what it says. If you expose someone to information, they will automatically not be able to not ingrain it in a memory or be able to recollect it or feel it being familiar if they hear it later on. And then you have the illusion of truth effect. And that's what I'm going to go in a little bit deeper on. The illusion of truth effect is an effect where they tested people, giving them statements with information which are truthful and false. And the way they distinguish between truthful and false is by telling them, after they've said the sentence, which sentence is false. The effect itself is stronger the more detailed the sentence is. But it all most likely comes down to when you remember something and try to extract it from your memory, you will only be able to sort of either recollect it from your mental model, if you have it ingrained in your left side of the brain, if you believe the hemisphere hypothesis from Dr. Ian McGilchrist, or if you remember that it sounds familiar to you, then you believe that it's more true. And in one such test, the probability of you thinking that a statement is true is more than or around 70%, even though they told you it was false from the beginning. Now, that's a heck of an effect if you don't want to be sucker punched into believing a lie. But that's basically how rumors are spread on TikTok, Instagram, and other social media channels, but also when young children in school are getting sucker punched into believing each other's lies and falsehoods. So basically, you can be tricked into believing anything except when you really make an effort in remembering what was said, which means that you have to repeat it into your long-term memory, which then becomes your mental model of the world. And this is important because if you're stressed, for example, I would argue that the effect of the illusion of truth effect would become even stronger. And the reason for that is if you don't have the time and the energy to repeat and ingrain a memory and make it relevant for you, then you will only be familiar with the statement. And that familiarity will then make you not question where the memory itself comes from. And you will, by definition, think that it's true.